I had an idyllic experience because I didn't have to apply for it. Luther was going to have a vacancy for 1 year. My debate coach was going to go off to Minnesota to finish his doctorate. So he asked if I'd be willing to come there. Having been a student, I knew all of the mores and people's suppositions and how everything worked. And there were still faculty members that I had had. And they were good to me. They were used to having former students teach there, and they treated them like equals right away, which I appreciated. I remember very vividly my first class that I went to. I had figured out what I was going to do, and I had looked over the room and so on. And I came in, and there were 18 young men, no women in the class. They looked friendly, and a lot of them were veterans, you see, who had just come back from service. They were mature, and I went up on a little stage and put my things down and started talking earnestly and more earnestly. And I moved, I took a step, I stepped off the platform, and I grabbed the speaking stand, and it rocked back and forth with me, back and forth, but I didn't fall, and I didn't miss a word. I just went right on talking, and I can still see the facial expressions of some of those people. It was just that they were worried about me. They hoped I was all right. So you can see the kind of backing that I had. It was a very good experience. Now, it might be appropriate to mention, since I think that I probably should speak a little bit about what there was to contend with, that when it was announced that I was to be the new editor at the convention, 2 men spoke to me right afterwards, quite indignantly, and said they didn't see why I was chosen when they had been candidates. Now, I was not a bit surprised at one of them because that just fit what I thought of him. He was a prominent soul in the association. But I was surprised at the other one because he was a friend. But he got over that, and I got over my surprise, and we continued to be friends. Because I thought in writing, a woman's writing looks just the same as a man's does. But I did notice eventually that the articles that were signed by men tended to get more attention. And I heard about the experience of writers like George Eliot and so on that took men's names. So when I was the new editor, newly appointed editor of The Speech Teacher, which is now Com Education, I was quite aware of some of these problems. I went to a meeting, this was about 1972, I think, of our women's caucus at the National Association group. And they were talking about how they wanted to promote having manuscripts submitted without the names of the writers to the
blind review process.
Yeah, they wanted the blind review process. And I said, well, don't worry about it. We're going to have it. I am going to be the new editor. They didn't know that yet. And we are going to have that. Now, it took me a year to catch on also to the problem of sexist language. But once I got converted about a year in, I then switched. I'd use the plural, they, and that worked fine. You didn't have to say he and she did this and that and so on, or him and her. You could say they, and it worked out fine. So I thought I made a little contribution there. And then also in selecting my editorial staff, at that time, 1/3 of the members of the association were women, but they were unrepresented highly. So I said I was going to have 1/3 of my staff be women. And they were. I knew the ones to appoint and was glad to get them. Now I had some good help, and I'm going to emphasize there that Dr. Braden was helpful to me. And Bob Scott from the University of Minnesota suggested Carlin Camel, a very fortunate selection, and 2 other people. So I had help. Well, I'll tell you what it reminded me of. I have gone to the Mayo Clinic enough so that I'm on their mailing list and get their things, and they get out a lot of interesting things. So they had a little letter in there one time from that nice Minnesota humorist, Garrison Keillor, right, Norwegian. And he had some problem, and he went to the clinic. So he wrote up what his experience had been. And he said, you know, it's quite satisfying to the ego to be the subject of conversation of all of these people. And I've chuckled over that a good many times. So I thought of that in this regard, too. But I always dispensed advice freely. You know, if I thought I had anything to offer, I told them. And if they asked, I did the best I could. I usually thought it over for a while. My father was a thoughtful man, and he would usually think overnight. Well, I think maybe 2 or 3 nights, and dredge up things that I think might be useful. And then I share them. So communication is sharing.